Today on The Public Interest, we're talking about better together and marijuana legalization. Welcome to The Public Interest with David Stokes. I'm David Stokes. Today on the program we have Gary Wiegert. Gary's a former St. Louis City police officer who's been active for a long time in many public policy issues. Today we're here to talk with him about Better Together, which was just recently pulled, although you say it has not officially been pulled yet.
Correct.
So they've announced that it's going to be pulled, and we're going to talk about medical marijuana and marijuana legalization efforts, along with some of Gary's charitable work as well. Gary, thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Glad to be here.
Now, are you still with the police department, or have you retired?
No, I retired. I did
I thought you
35
had.
years. I did 35 years, just retired. I've been retired now almost 3 years.
Well,
I'll have a drink.
Cheers. Cheers. Thank you for joining us today. Gary, you were very active in efforts to oppose the Better Together plan to merge St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and parts of the municipal services of St. Louis County. Now that they've announced that they're going to pull back and potentially revise it, potentially shelve it till the future, who knows exactly what they're going to do. Why do you think people were so opposed to it?
I think the way it was done, everything was done behind the scenes, and the way it was approached for the statewide vote, people really were offended that the people in outstate Missouri would decide our fate here. Now, my understanding is Better Together had done their polling, and I'm sure they had, and their numbers were very weak in St. Louis County. So it was a very hard sell for them to try to get that passed in St. Louis County. So they tried to go around, do an end around, and try to get the whole state to vote for them.
Do you think they would have had a chance at winning that? Obviously, the fact that they've pulled it will indicate no. But
I think the opposition.
What was your forecast?
Yeah, I think the opposition was so strong. It was so bitterly opposed, not only by the county but by the city. So we had. The Republican Central Committee, both in the county and the city, came out against it. You had the St. Louis City Central Committee come out against it.
The Democrats.
The Democrats. So there's a lot of people in this process who felt left out and felt like they were just being run over.
Now, other than, you've already mentioned the statewide vote issue, which we've talked about with prior guests on the show. But other than the statewide vote, what were some of your major objections to the plan?
Well, I think the consolidation of the police departments. I think that was I did not like the way they were trying to promote that. I heard the one guy from Better Together say the police were killing innocent people, and that's the reason why we needed to do this. I thought that was a bad approach.
Now, who was that in a public forum? Or
yeah, that was out
interview?
in Chesterfield. When I was out in Chesterfield, that was some young intern named Will something or other, some kid. And so he brought that up. A crowd booed him. I mean, they were booing him strong on that. And what it looks like it's an attack on all the police departments. And I think Better Together was trying to exploit the Ferguson issue. And I think that offended a lot of folks that they were basically trying to take advantage of that to merge all these police departments. And, a lot of these people, they love their local police departments. And they're happy with they're satisfied with the work that they receive from their police departments, and they don't want to give them up. And I think that was probably the strongest opposition out here.
Was there anything about the proposal that you liked, even halfway?
The trouble is, once you start debating these issues, you come out against almost everything there. An interesting thing about that is, so the earnings tax, I'm against all taxes, period. And so I voted against the earnings tax in St. Louis City. But you just can't come out and say, okay, we're going to get rid of taxes. You have to say, okay, how are we going to get rid of the spending? And so I think that was a big mistake there. The citizens of St. Louis voted 72% to support the earnings tax. So I mean, you have to abide by the will of the people there. And if the people of St. Louis want their earnings tax, then they're going to have their earnings tax, even though I may disagree with it. But you just can't overturn the will of the people. And I think that's a problem with it. A lot of the things with the Better Together plan, there was no guarantees. There was nothing with the pensions. They just can't come in and say, you know what, you're going to keep all your benefits. Well, okay, how are they going to be paid for? And I think that was a very big problem too.
Now let's talk about the municipalities in St. Louis County. You were opposed to the Better Together plan, but I think most people would agree that we need some municipal reform in St. Louis County. I mean, we shouldn't. we've undertaken some of those reforms. The state legislature did pass bills limiting how much of a city's budget can come from
Senate Bill
traffic
5.
tickets.
Senate
and
Bill
that.
5, yes.
So we've taken some of these reforms, and that was a very good reform. But what are some other reforms you think, with or without Better Together, with or without some type of a merger? What are some of the reforms you think that either St. Louis City needs for itself, or the county municipalities need? Like, I'll start off with, I liked the part about Better Together taking away much of the sales tax authority from the municipalities within the county. I mean, I think there's a lot of abuse there. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what municipal reforms in the area you think we could use.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, my beliefs when it comes to taxes is I'm against taxes. But you better replace it with some. I mean, if all of a sudden you're going to take away that income, you're going to have to replace it with something.
Or cut something.
Or cut something, yes. And so if a company legislation came in and said, okay, you're going to have to cut this or you're going to have to cut that, and when we do this sales tax, and that's fine. But I don't think you can say, you can always say, we're going to cut these taxes and that's going to guarantee all these businesses to come in here. So that part I disagree with. But yeah, you almost have to put that in the legislation. Here's what you have to cut. And I don't know if St. Louis City is capable of taking the hard choices on that.
Now, you are a city resident now.
And I'm still a city resident. I always have. And I'll be honest with you, I receive a pension from St. Louis City, from the police department pension. I contributed 7% of my income to that. And it's managed by some folks from the city, some retired policemen, some active policemen. We're a very conservative pension system. But it's got very good benefits. I never paid into Social Security, so I'll never receive Social Security benefits. So, I mean, there's different things that I like about our pension, and I do want that guarantee that money's going to be there. I mean, that's very important to me.
Now, as a city resident, if you could wave a magic wand, just focus on the city, what are some of the reforms you'd like to see in the city right now? Because obviously it's not merging into there's not going to be a merger, at least for the foreseeable future. But do you think the city should re-enter the county? Do you think, what other major changes, if any, would you support? From your background in all the politics that you've done.
So I think as time, these things take time. They don't happen automatically.
They absolutely take time.
And it's got to be organic. It can't be saying, okay, we're going to force you to do this. So I'll give you an example. I rehabbed an old house in Lafayette Square where nobody wanted. I bought it. It was just a pile of bricks. It was vacant for probably 30 years. Nobody wanted to even be down there. I rehabbed it, and it has to come from the individuals out there. I think if you look at developers, I think you're going wrong, and that's what I think St. Louis is doing wrong right now. They're trying to give their property to these big developers, and so then they get their tax credits and everything else. When Lafayette Square started, it didn't receive tax credits. It was a bunch of people who came in with beautiful houses, and they sunk their own money into it. And it was a little rough down there. There was a lot of crime and a lot of problems, but we persevered. That's what brings neighborhoods back. If it's a groundswell of people moving in there to fix it up, I think things come back. But I think when you try to force development, I think you have problems. And so later on, developers came in and they did get the historic tax credits, and I was real glad that they were able to utilize those tax credits. I never used those. I mean, let's face it, those are pretty much for developers to take advantage of.
They are indeed.
And I am against the majority of the tax credits that are out there, because I think most people don't understand what the tax credits are. It's my understanding is you get a tax credit, you turn around and sell it.
You do.
You don't get the
in
full,
most cases.
You don't get the full amount for it. People assume when you get tax credits that means you just write off your taxes, but you didn't sell it. So everybody's making a profit off it down the line, and I really just don't know if I do not like the low-income tax credits. I think they're terrible. I don't
low-income
think
housing tax credits.
Low-income housing tax credits. I know we had a number of developers who wanted to come into Lafayette Square, and they wanted to do a combination of low-income tax credits and historic tax credits. We're like, no, we don't want that. If we're gonna, and now those houses are very expensive. Houses that people paid a small amount for now are going for big money, and they don't want the people to come in with that are subsidized. They want it to be market rate, and I agree with that. I believe in the market. I said the market should set the rate, not the tax credits.
Excellent. Do you live in Lafayette Square now?
I do. I still live in Lafayette Square. Didn't get help from anybody. I just did it on my own, and matter of fact, I couldn't even get a loan, and so I just paid for it as I went. And I think that's the way people should do that.
Nobody disputes that places like Soulard and Benton
Yes.
Park and Lafayette Square and the Central West End and other areas throughout Old North St. Louis, throughout much of the city, have revitalized organically.
Yes.
And it's been a beautiful thing.
Yes, and I think that's what you have to do. It has to be, but it can't be forced in by the government or by the city or anything else. And I have a problem with that once they do that. And then you also have the city picks the people who are the developers, and of course you've got all the donors. I mean, look at St. Louis County. Look what happened out there. I mean, the donors were driving what was going on out there, and talk about corruption.
Are you suggesting there was something scandalous in St. Louis County government in the past few weeks?
Everybody was saying how scandalous the city is, but the county's holding its own when it comes to scandal.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, it brought a lot of people from the city out to the county. You saw people out there with no-show jobs out in the county, and I thought that only happened in the city, but obviously that happens everywhere.
Now, Gary, you were real active, very active in the medical marijuana amendments on the
Yes.
ballot in November, one of which passed. And so we've got medical marijuana coming to Missouri. I don't believe it's here yet. But what do you think? How do you think that's going to work out for the state? I want to talk about medical marijuana first, and then we'll go more generally.
Okay, and I lobbied for Show Me Cannabis for about a year and a half. And at one point, Show Me Cannabis decided to go into the statewide vote.
Now, is that the one that passed?
Yes, and that
It is.
eventually did pass. And out of the three amendments, two were constitutional. There was a third one put in by I believe that was the Habas-Tilley group, put a third one in. And so the Ben Bradshaw one failed. People saw that for what it was. It was a grab by Ben Bradshaw to corner the market. And the Show Me Cannabis one was, I believe, a more organic. Now, later on, big donors came in. But that was the one that passed. And that had... I think their big difference was they actually had home grows in there. And I don't know if people know what home grows are, but home grows is a lot of people can't afford the medical marijuana with their medical problems. So I think they're allowed to have probably 8 plants at various stages, and so they could do home grows on that. There's a lot of restrictions when I say home grows, what you can do with that. So of course, I worked at I was head of security at a marijuana farm, and of course one of the problems is there. What do you do with the odors? So you got to vent the odors. You got to do a lot of stuff. You got to make sure the public can't see what you're growing or where you're growing it at. So there was a lot of rules over there in Illinois, and so I think ours is going to be a little less restrictive. But
You say that. I was in Denver not all that long ago, and I did notice that all the marijuana facilities there, like they're all boarded up. Like you can't really go up to the window and just look in and see what's happening. At least the ones I saw. I don't know if that's legally required or.
When we were doing our lobbying, I went out to California, and they wouldn't let me inside unless you got a red card. Basically, you have a card to go in there. They won't let you inside. But the guy would open it up. He'd open up the door and just let me look in to see how to lay out, because I was looking how to do our security. And I know a lot of the farms are a little different. They're a little more rural. But then you have the dispensaries. And I know Colorado had a lot of problems with people just driving, stolen trucks right through the front door. But as you go along, people are learning. You have a lot of trial and error. And so at each night, you lock it up in the vault. You lock up your product in the vault. And so that's the way to get around that. And usually what you do is you're in a waiting room, and then you go from the waiting room into another room where then you make the sales. And then you allow a number of people to go in there at a time, so that way they can't make a run on it and grab things and dash. So I mean, they've got it down. It's been going on long enough now. They know how to monitor it.
About how many people are expected to make use of medical marijuana in Missouri once it's now that it's been legalized, but once it's finalized and the rules and it's up and going?
That I do not know the exact numbers. It depends on. I think it's really going to depend on what you get your medical marijuana card for. So I know in Illinois, when I was over there, it was very restrictive. They had a list of remedies that you could get it for. But if there's a lot of things that people have with normal pain or some mental problems, then it'll open up to like stress. Simple thing like stress. They didn't have that in Illinois. I think they're in the process of changing that.
To allow for?
Yeah, I believe so.
Stress?
And well, most people, if you just monitored what bills pass over the years, no one has ever gone full legal or at least when I was into this, I haven't checked recently, but as long as I think 2 years ago, no one got full legal until you had medical marijuana first. And so states kind of like that. They like to try it out and see how it works. And then when they see the world doesn't fall apart, then they go ahead and they go with the full legalization.
I think Missouri clearly will eventually get to full legalization. What do you think that time frame is?
I would give it 5 years, something like that. You see how see right now you really don't even know what your markets are. You don't know how many people are going to be out there. You don't know how much to grow to the market. I think a lot of people with the home grows are going to be growing their own, and and that's good for a lot of these poor people. You know, when I lobbied down in Jefferson City, I had 2 mothers with me whose children had epilepsy, and they were very good to lobby with. We had legislators and their assistants were crying. You know, the kids were having convulsions while we were there, and there's no guarantee that the medical marijuana is going to help those kids, but people want to have hope.
Right.
And I think you try it. Right now, it's I don't know if we've got research up on what different strains do what, but I think that's really where we need to really do some checking into or research into to see what strains help you how.
What are some of the problems that people have encountered, both in medical marijuana and in full legalization? I mean, I do. Some people object to just when you go through downtown Denver, you smell a lot of marijuana as you walk around out there. What are some of the problems that people have found?
Well,
because as you said, you got to learn, you got to go through it and see the ups and downs. And I think most people think there's more ups. Many people certainly agree there's more ups than downs. But what are some of the issues you got to encounter?
Your ups is your tax money, and then of course the legalization keeps down the robberies and the drug robberies and everything that goes with that. So that's a good help. Now, when it comes to what's the detractions, of course I would assume you're going to have more people who are going to be on the marijuana itself using, and then you're going to have. There's no way for police departments to measure if you're high or not at the time. Right now, it just detects if you get, I believe, THC in your system, or maybe it's just marijuana in your system. I don't know if it measures THC or not, but they don't have a way like they have with alcohol that you blow in, and I don't know how accurate those DWI things are, but that's what we use. And so there's no way to really measure if you're high or not. My understanding is marijuana stays in your system. I believe it's either 2 days or 5 days or something like that that's in your system.
But a police officer has to know, like, a field test to tell if somebody's
right. And
stoned. And I would, if you found somebody and you think they're driving while under the influence of marijuana, there's got to be field tests that I would hope admissible in court.
Sure, it's going to be the same. You're still going to be walking the line and doing the finger to nose test, which you have to do anyway. Right. I mean, so you have to do that to show that they're impaired. Sometimes, it's a combination. A lot of times it'd be a combination of alcohol and drugs that people would take. So I would take people down for a DWI test, and they'd almost register nothing. They might have a very small amount, but you combine beer with some Darvocets, and now you've got somebody who's staggering around. So I mean, the blood test, of course, is the best, but I right now they just don't have a really good way to measure it, and I think that's what law enforcement's looking for. And law enforcement always adapts to whatever you have. Just like the criminals adapt to when law enforcement has things, then people adapt. I mean, law enforcement adapts that way too.
Now, Gary, among other things you're working on right now, I know you've started a new charity to help police officers who've been injured on the job get back into the workforce, either with the police department they were with or in another capacity. Tell us about that.
So a group I helped set up back in service, and I followed Eric Greitens. I'm friends with Eric. And I saw what he did for the military, and I really love what he did. He set that up. I kind of modeled it on his program. And that's to help people get jobs. And we don't. It's a group of retired policemen that have gotten together and from the area, and we try to help these guys when they get injured. We have a lot of people get injured on the job, and we try to place them in different training. We just try to reinforce that hey, it's possible you can go do this. And these policemen who get shot, get injured, they still got a lot of value out there to the community. And you go one day you're working, next day you're shot, and all of a sudden you're kind of lost. And a lot of these guys, after they take really a tough injury, they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol. We try to help them get through that and get out there and be a productive member of society again.
Well, that's fantastic. And is there a website people can check out for that, or a Facebook page?
I got backinservice.com. I think that's what you just Google search Back in Service. And we have a web page set up, and it tells you who's on our board and what we do. And we've had a couple successes. We got one of our injured officers through Launch Code. He just graduated through Launch Code, which was great training.
That's great.
And that's a fantastic thing. I've helped some other people get some jobs as investigators. And, it's very hard for policemen to gear up and try to do something different. They've got that police mindset. It's in their mind, and they want to do something related. We'd like to try to help them out to do something totally different, because these people do have some skills. And so we'd like to see them try to get in it. But it's very hard to get them to get out of that mindset that they're the police. Very hard for them to do that. And so, but that's something that it happens even to retirees. You're used to doing this your whole life, and all of a sudden you got to get it out of your mind. Hey, you see something going on, you're like, hey, you know what? That's not my concern anymore. I'm not going to jump in.
You tell somebody to do something now, they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, you're retired, that's right.
Yeah. I see something going on. I was like, hey, that ain't right. And it's like, wait a second, this isn't my game anymore. So I'm out of it. I'll let others go ahead and do that.
Well, Gary, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for all your great work with Back to Badge and helping it, and thanks for all your service as a police officer. So this has been The Public Interest with David Stokes. Please join us next week for more polite conversation about state and local policy issues. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you very much.